Welcome to Pandas Nightmares. In today's video, you will hear stories from people who work graveyard shifts and have experienced some crazy things. If you do like my content, do like and subscribe as it will help me grow. I am creating content to try to raise funds for my dad's treatment. So, if you want to support his ongoing battle, the GoFundMe link is in the description section below. Thank you so much for watching, I really appreciate it. And now let's get started. Enjoy. Story 1. Roughly 5 years ago, I was working janitorial in a mall in British Columbia. The task I was assigned was to clean all the main entrances to the mall, pretty basic. Mop floors, clean windows, vacuum rugs, and it was weird to see people walking around the exterior of the mall for a few reasons. A large parking lot, and it's really late at night. This random drunk dude wanders up to the main doors, waves at me and asks how I'm doing. I wave back and say fine. He then whips out his penis and starts trying to pee on me through the small crack in the door. Luckily, the crack isn't that big, and I'm quick enough to get out of the way of the stream that makes it through the door. He started laughing, and as I stood in shock, staring at him, a police officer flashes his lights, and the guy starts to run. He didn't make it very far. Apparently, security was watching me on camera, almost getting pissed on, so he called the cops. Story 2. I used to work in a hospital in the IT department, and we did a number of overnight rollouts, as well as on-call work response when issues occurred overnight. Many weird things happened, or appeared to happen. The thing that struck me as oddest was when I saw the coroner running at full speed down the corridor, in the opposite direction, towards the morgue. This guy, an older guy in his 50s or so, was going at full speed. I had never seen him above an amble before, but this time he was really going for it. As he got close to me, he yelled out of the way. I got another live one. I am not sure what was more disturbing. The fact that he was dealing with what I could only assume was a dead body that now appeared to be alive, or the fact he said another. Story 3. I work in a sleep lab. Just a regular night until my first patient arrived. He was a young, black male, approx. 18 YO. The first words out of his mouth were, "Do you have any lotion?" Maybe. I'll check for you." I took him to his room and did a quick search for lotion. He must be a bit ashy, I thought. Quick background info. Most sleep lab rooms have microphones and cameras to confirm rare sleep disorders. No lotion, except for a coworker's really feminine variety. So, I flick the mic on and tell him that we're all out. "Is there a camera in here?" "Yes, sir," I said. "Before I go further, there is time allocated before sleep studies for patients to get settled, do paperwork, eat, etc. Right before I go in to begin the test, I turn the cameras on, and there he was, on his back in the center of the bed, completely naked. He had commandeered our liquid hand soap and was lubing and stroking with the efficiency and coordination of an Olympic athlete. That bastard knew we had cameras. To top it off, he didn't clean up. He left the liquid soap covered in its own, and his own, ejaculate on the nightstand right next to the bed. "Wherever you are, you bastard, I know what you did, and now..." Story 4. I'll give you 2 for the price of 1. As a pretext, I answer phones for an answering service. One night, I took a call from some account we barely take calls for. It was dead air for a moment, and suddenly this guy starts singing, "Hey there, Little Red Riding Hood, you sure are looking good. You're everything a big bad wolf could want," and then went quiet. Despite me trying to get a response, he just kept breathing. Eventually, I hung up on him. This one is disturbing in a different way. Another night a year or so ago, I took a call for a vet's office from a woman that was in a panic because her cat was sick. She wasn't sure what was wrong, but I could hear the poor thing gargling as it meowed like it had blood in its lungs. The woman said the cat was all she had left, so I tried my best to get all her info down, so I could get the vet ASAP. But the cat died before I could. The only reason I even knew that was because I heard it stop making noise. The poor woman lost it. She began bawling hysterically and screaming, begging the cat to get up, and then begged God not to take the cat because she'd have nobody left. After I realized there was nothing I could do or say because she walked away from the phone, I quietly hung up and just kind of sat there for a minute. That call has stuck with me for a while. Story 5. Around 12 years ago, I was working security at a small company's headquarters in New York City. My partner for the night had called in sick, so I had to work from 12 to 6 all by my lonesome. Now normally, this wouldn't be a problem. I just had to sit in the back room, watch some cameras, and occasionally head out for a sweep. Nothing to it, right? Well, as it turns out, one of the employees had stayed in the building after hours and had managed to avoid my coworker's sweep from the previous shift. I first noticed a movement in my peripheral vision on one of the screens, and then again a few minutes later. This was odd, because I was used to quiet nights in this particular building. I was a little scared when I headed out for my sweep, but it was my job, so I grabbed my flashlight and headed out to begin. I had to start the sweep in one big hallway, and right as I entered, I saw a flash of movement at the end of it. At this point, I was sufficiently freaked out. I stood frozen for a minute or so, looking into the semi-darkness, unsure of what to do. The decision was taken out of my hands, however, as I heard a gunshot resound down the hallway. In what was the scariest moment of my life, I slowly walked down that hallway to investigate. I reached the end and saw to my left that the president's office light was on. Slowly, I approached the door and creaked it open, scared shitless. What I saw will forever haunt me. The man had taken a seat in the president's chair and shot himself in the head with a pistol, splattering blood and brains all over the floor and the wall. Apparently this guy was having problems at home, and because the president was supposedly a total asshole to him, he decided to off himself and scare the crap out of the president at the same time. In any case, I threw up a few times and called the police. I got the next 2 weeks off. I still have nightmares about it sometimes. Story 5. Hotel employee checking in on this thread. I used to work overnight shift for a few years. I have seen some shit. The hotel I work at is a great place. Really well maintained, high occupancy, high rates until the weekend hits. Friday and Saturday nights are slower, so the rates drop, bringing in not-so-savory folk. I have 2 stories that are good, and I may have shared them before. This hotel is 100% pet-friendly. Mostly we get dogs, cats, birds. Occasionally we get snakes, lizards, and a few potbelly pigs. Now to the shit show of a few weird nights working overnight. I came into work at 11 p.m. and it was a quiet Saturday night. I plowed through the paperwork, finished all my duties for the night, and was kicking back watching movies on my laptop. A guest comes to the desk asking if we had a room with 2 beds available. They'll rate and about our pet policy. I answered their questions and checked them in. The guests leave and said they were going bowling and that they would be back. A few hours later, around 2 a.m., they call the front desk, ask for an extra robe, and request me to deliver it, saying they would make it worth my time. I ask the bellman to watch the desk and go to deliver the robe. I get to their room and knock on the door. The guests ask me come back a few minutes later. I'll go to smoke a cigarette and come back 10 minutes later. I knock again and they ask me to go away and come back later. I oblige, and as I am walking away I heard a snorting sound. This sound was horrendous. It sounded like a pot-bellied pig. I am walking away thinking WTF is going on. My bellman calls me on my walkie and asks if I called the fire department and an ambulance. I let him know I did not, and I walked back to the room. I dropped the robe at the door and knocked to let them know I had an emergency to attend to. The guests fling the door open and frantically ask if I was the fire department. I look down the hall and see paramedics and firemen racing towards me. I look into the room and see a 250-pound woman in nothing but a robe and red thong laying motionless on the floor. The woman is grey with foam coming out her mouth. The pig noise was the woman fighting to breathe. I step inside the room and hold the door for the emergency personnel. They ask the couple inside what happened. The couple respond that what had happened was they met their friend at the bowling alley. They were all celebrating a birthday and had too much to drink. Then their friend was too drunk to drive, so they came back to the hotel to let her sleep it off, and she just collapsed. They give the medics her name and as much information they knew about her. By this time, the sheriffs arrived to escort the medics to a hospital. The sheriffs see this couple's bullshit story and ask the medics to empty this woman's purse. What falls out is a pharmacy of pills and powders, along with her ID, and pieced together, the woman was a pill-popping prostitute. The couple fesses up that she was popping pills and drinking heavily all night. The medics cart the pale woman away, still in the robe and thong, to a hospital. The sheriffs give the guests and myself the information on this woman for my report. The guests then stay in the room, watch about $100 in adult movies, have a huge breakfast in the morning, and check out late. We charge them for the robe. Story 6. I used to work in a hotel reception. An older gentleman walks to the front desk at midnight, asking for a room. I give him the details and check him in. He seemed normal and quite cordial. The gentleman goes to his room and a few hours later comes down to the front desk and asks me if I knew where to score some ecstasy. I tell him no, and he storms off out of the hotel, mumbling to himself, saying he wants to kill me. Now, I don't feel endangered by this guy, as I have a weight-height advantage on him and know how to handle myself in a fight thanks to training by my ex-Marine brother. This guy comes back to the hotel a few hours later, in a much better mood. Me, on the other hand, am scared shitless. He comes strolling in wearing a thick shivers officer jacket and a shivers hat. He asks me if I had a girlfriend, and I reply yes. He tells me to dump her 'cause women are evil. He then tells me his story of heartbreak and his revelation. This guy went to prison for beating his ex-wife, in a rage of finding out she cheated on him. He had a revelation while in prison. The best experience was making love to a man, and that women were the devil. The guy then warns me to dump women and to consider men. I apologize to him about how I am straight and thank him for the story. He then walks away, saying to reconsider and not to knock it till I try it. Once he left, I call 911 and ask if anyone is missing a jacket and a hat. They say that they will check the on-duty officers and will call back. They call back and ask me if the person was staying at the hotel. I confer with them his details and description. They inform me to keep away from him, that he took a brick to a window of a cruiser. The officer was on break at a nearby diner just doing paperwork at a table, and stole a taser, jacket, hat, and club. A few minutes later, the hotel is surrounded. Officers ask for his room number and an override key. I provide them all the information, and the officers race to his room. There they find him watching adult movies, sodomizing himself with the club. They come out with the guy cuffed. He yells to me on the way out to reconsider his beliefs of women. Surprisingly, his credit card went through for the charges. Story 7. So, working the night shift at a hotel front desk is an interesting job. You get your drunks, your meatheads, and your all-around nutbags. One night, our hotel was hosting a college baseball team. The team came back around 11 p.m. and went up to their rooms and to bed. No big deal. Then, around 1 a.m., the coaches came back absolutely hammered. They went up to their rooms, and that was the last I heard from them for about an hour. While I was setting up for breakfast, I heard the elevator ding around at 3 a.m., daylight savings night in the spring. Out of the elevator bursts one of the coaches, and he runs straight out the front door. Odd, but okay. Whatever. He comes running back inside, shouting, "He fell. He fell." I run outside while pulling out my phone and dialing 911 to see one of the coaches who would come back, face down on the ground in a huge puddle of blood. I have had a bit of rescue training, so I knew to put him in the rescue position so he wouldn't choke on his own blood. The paramedics got there, and as they were loading him up, one of them wiped off his forehead, and there it was. The guy had fallen out of a third-story window straight on his forehead and split it open so wide and deep you could see his brain. He was life-flighted up to the bigger hospital up north. He lived. I got a raise the next day. Story 8. I drive a truck, and, when I hauled steel, I would often run on paper logs, drive all day and well into the night. I'd do upwards of 1,000 miles, 19 hours in a day, and the tail end of those trips were always a little harrowing. When you get within 10 to 20 miles of your destination, and precious sleep, you get a sudden burst of energy, just enough so that you'll know you'll make it, and that the risk of falling asleep at the wheel is no longer present. It's a nice feeling of satisfaction, but it doesn't come without a price. Hallucinations. For me at least, that last breath of energy after a long run often brought with it some crazy shit. To make matters worse, places where one might deliver sheet metal coils tend to be right. Directly inside the butt crack of fucking nowhere, and reaching them involved lots of two-lane roads through the woods. Combine narrow, twisting roads, hallucinations, paranoia about getting caught running illegal, and just enough energy to be aware of it all, and you've got what we like to call a situation on your hands. One particular night stands out. The 800 or so miles had taken about 17 hours, thanks to the hills and the back roads I had taken to get there. To as close a place to Ruro as New Jersey likely gets, just across the Delaware from Philly. I was coming down from a back-to-back dose of double shots, and was about 15 minutes away from the 4 hours of sleep I would be getting that night, so I was on edge and starting to see shit again. My hallucinations weren't really readily identifiable things like people, oases, or giant stacks of bacon and such, but vague flashes of movement and light. It was as if a fox, wearing a suit of strobing LEDs, was about to dart out of the tree line. It freaked me out just enough that I usually had one foot on the clutch at all times, in case I had to jam the brakes. I knew it wasn't real, but it still bothered me. In the midst of all of this, I was rounding a bend and saw about a quarter mile down the road a man standing in my lane. He had a green reflective vest on and was waving his arms. Too real and tangible to be a hallucination. I began to slow down, immediately wary of the situation, and the scene unfolded before me as I got closer. A mid-size SUV was on its side on the other side of the road, and a little pull-off, carved out of the forest, was bristling with some sort of construction activity at the lively hour of 3 a.m. I said, aloud, "What the fuck?" Then, from out of the trees burst a fucking bobcat. No, not a mountain lion, but one of those little, four-wheeled mini-excavator things commonly used in landscaping. It darted about with all of the agility of its namesake, save for the moment when it turned to face the roof of the car, where it nearly tipped over. The bobcat pushed the vehicle over, and at least a dozen people crawled out. I stopped counting at 8. I was in a state of mental lapse and had no idea what had happened. Finally, the guy in the vest let me pass. My last 10 minutes or so of driving were marked by a sense of calm, as I saw every cot car and ambulance in southern Jersey fly past me in the opposite direction, knowing they had something better to do than check my logs. I got to my destination safely and went to sleep. Story 9. I worked at a campground on night shift, 1, 2 a.m., 8 a.m., every night. It wasn't bad, I would bring in my PS2 and game a good portion of the night, only having to deal with 1 or 2 people on busy nights. It was just me in this little 8 feet by 8 shack, with nothing around but dark, all night. My first week there, the other third shift guy who was quitting told me about this payphone a few feet from the shack where I worked. He said it rang every night at 4:17 a.m., just once. It was probably just an automated test call, he guessed. He's never answered it himself. I go for a few months with the job. It was the middle of summer, so most nights I had the windows closed so I couldn't hear the payphone go off. Mid-August, I started leaving the windows open during the night. Sure enough, at 4:17 a.m. every morning the phone would ring once. The ring even sounded creepy, like the payphone was submerged in water, then put where it sat. One night I got up the nerve to answer it. I set an alarm at 4:15 a.m. and would go wait at the phone until it rang. When it did, I answered it. But there was no sound, just dead air, like the someone was on the other line but wasn't answering. I said hello a few times and hung up. I did this every night for a week with the same results. I didn't think anything of it and left it alone after that for about a month. The first week of October, I decided to answer the phone once again. I set my alarm, and when the time came, I answered the phone. Hello, hello. Then I heard what sounded like someone inhaling through clenched teeth. The voice that sounded was rough and sounded like he had gargled gravel. The best comparison I can give is Horace P. Gage from The Suffering. He said my name, my complete name, first, middle, and last. It was a voice I'd never heard. My voice caught in my throat and I hung up. I rattled some change into the payphone and hit *69. The number had come from California. I live in Indiana. Story 10. I worked in a shipping and receiving facility that was originally built as a military base and munitions factory and storage during World War II. One night, my partner and I were alone in the facility, just the two of us. He had a habit of sneaking off to sleep. I didn't care. There was only 2 of us, and if I really needed him, I could radio him and he'd come back. So one night, he goes off to do rounds. Nap. Here's where I should describe our office a little bit. The main doors and entryway connect to the electromagnet secured inner doors, and in between the two sits our office. There are windows on all 4 sides so we can see the employee parking lot, and then into the main corridor of the facility. Now, on these shifts, we would sometimes watch TV on the computers, so that's what I did while my partner was out. Sitting there, minding my own business, I turned around to watch the show on the computer behind me, and then turned around and looked out to the main corridor and saw what looked like a person standing in front of the window. But all I could see was the shoulder seam of a jacket and some kind of patch. I jumped, but thought it was my partner, except he never came through the doors. So after a minute, I convinced myself that I was just tired and went back to watching TV. After a few more minutes, I turned back around, and there was the jacket in front of the window again. The patch faded away as I sat staring, and my partner didn't come back for another 30 minutes. There's also what we refer to as ghost traffic. There are cameras all over the inner and outer perimeters of the facility, so we can always see and usually hear if there are semi-trucks entering or leaving the facility. Sometimes we can hear a truck drive by our office, but we never see one. They never pull up to the guard shack outside by the gate, and nothing is ever seen on camera. That is all for today. If you have enjoyed this video, do like and subscribe, and let me know below of your thoughts. If you want to help in my dad's fundraiser, I would truly appreciate it. Hope you have an absolutely amazing day. You can also check my other videos on screen,